Suite and
Okay, let's get started. Good morning. I hope that you've had a good weekend. We are already in the 5th week. In fact, this is the last day of January. It feels like it's been a really long month. So thank you for all of your hard work and participation so far in the class. We're definitely moving right along and making some really good progress. So I had a couple questions come up that I wanted to address. First of all, Haley was asking about the time for receiving feedback. So because of the get out of jail free card, right, and in order to be fair for everybody else, I am going to turn around that feedback at the earliest on Wednesday. So depending on folks that use the card, in order to turn in a late assignment, I'll use that to gauge when I'm able to send that feedback back out. My goal is to have it back for you hopefully by this Friday, in order just, again, to be fair for folks that turn that in late, and ensure that everybody gets feedback after they've turned it in. So just letting you know there. The other thing that I want to talk about is that the next major assignment in the course is now available. I'll be talking about that assignment and some of the expectations for that assignment today. And then also remember, if you need to miss class, either by participating through Zoom, as we have happening currently with Andre, right? You're welcome to do so. You can also complete the makeup assignment. I am asking you, if you're doing a makeup assignment, to do that within 2 weeks of the day that you missed. Remember, you get up to 3 classes where you can just not attend and not do the makeup. So just know that those opportunities are available for you as we get started. So in getting started for today, I want to talk about an idea first that'll be used for a prompt in just a little bit. So one of the core ideas that I want to get into for this week is about problem solving, right? So as you participated in groups already, you've been doing a lot when it comes to solving a problem or issue. For every assignment we've been doing in groups, for instance, things such as the various activities like the interview, pre-listening preparation activity, or the survival activity, right, where you're trapped in the wilderness trying to figure out what to do, or even the activity on the first day of class, where I asked you to find as many things in common with one another as you could, right? These have all been problems or issues that I've posed to you as a group in order to address and fix that thing, right? You could also think last week about how you were like a small business and you're trying to figure out how the different theories, X, Y, and Z, explain your group behavior. So these are all examples of how you, as part of a group, have engaged in problem solving. You might also think about in the groups that you're part of on your own, right? How you engage in problem solving too. For instance, if you're part of an athletic team on campus, right? You're oftentimes thinking about a game, the various ways that you do positions or practice or maneuvers, right? In order to win and to well at that game. If you're involved in something like a study group, right? Your goal is to figure out how to work together to prepare for something like an exam. Or if you're involved, again, in something like for professional work, you might think about how your team members work together to manage or deal with whatever tasks come up, right? So there's a lot of ways that being in a group inevitably means that you're trying to solve problems or figure out the tasks to which you're assigned, right? And that can be broken down into 7 key steps. The first being defining the problem, right? If you're part of an extracurricular on campus, right? Maybe something like the philosophy club, and you're trying to do some type of showcase or event where you talk about philosophy and its application to current events. You're going to have to figure out what your group needs to do. For instance, creating this event, generating interest, having people go to the event that you're hosting. You also want to analyze the problem, right? Analysis is about understanding and figuring out what it is that needs to happen. Well, you know that your group members need to put it together posters, You need to send out emails or flyers that this event is going to happen. You need to think about who's hosting or preparing. You need to think about the physical space or room that you're using to put on this philosophy event, right? You need to consider criteria, right? So you can think about criteria as something like a rubric or an assignment that you complete in the class, or guidelines, right? What needs to happen in order for this problem to be solved? What is the standard you're putting yourself to? For instance, if you were working in your group on these activities, right, you might think about, okay, how many sentences do I need to include? And I need to include everybody's name, right? That's the criteria for completing that assignment. You also need to consider possible solutions. So for instance, for this philosophy symposium or event, maybe you think about various rooms that could be housed in. You might think about various emails that could be sent out or places on campus where you can post flyers or other information. Then your group needs to decide on a solution. Okay, got these options available. Which one are we going to pick? Maybe this room is the best choice for us. Maybe these ways of circulating through flyers in various buildings on campus, best way to do it. Deciding on a solution is oftentimes the difficult part, right? Because when you're in a group, oftentimes we find ourselves trapped in a cycle where we're generating ideas, we're brainstorming, we're thinking up a solution, but we don't act on that or reach a solution together. Implementing, right, is doing the thing, actually hosting the event, using that room, getting it together, getting that philosophy event started, right? Doing the thing, once you've agreed upon that is important. And then lastly, a core idea is to follow up. So once you've completed and implemented a possible solution to a problem, you might say, okay, how did this philosophy symposium go? It seemed like we had some good attendance and there were some good ideas, but there's ways we can expand upon this, maybe host more people, maybe even have a bigger audience next year, right? So these 7 steps are things that we do all the time when we're thinking about participation in groups, and particularly moving from 4 to 5 is the hardest part, right? Because again, it's very easy to brainstorm and to come up with ideas, but given a lot of factors like groupthink, it can be hard for members of a group to really actually solve or address that issue. So given some of these steps and the ideas surrounding problem solving that we'll be getting into a little bit more for today, what I want you to do as part of your attendance credit for today is to think about one of the small group activities that you participated in over the course of the quarter. Again, there's a lot of different options you can choose from here. It could be the very beginning of class where you went around and tried to find things in common. It could be the pre-listening environment where you were preparing for an interview, right, and trying to create a good type of environment for everybody. It could be the small group activity where I was asking you to think about a hiking group. It could be the survival activity, and so on. Pick one of those activities that we did in class, and I want you to think about how your group in that activity engaged in these 7 steps of problem solving, including what went well and what was missing from those steps. So here's how our group went through this step. Here's how our group went through this step. So I'll give you a second to look at this. Then I'll go back to the previous slide to list out the 7 steps again. Remember that I also have all the slides uploaded before class on the campus, so you can access those for help. Again, these are the 7 steps, and I'm asking you to pick a small group activity and explain how your small group went through these different 7 steps.
establish a criteria?
It means figuring out how you'll judge the success or failure of that group's attempt to solve the problem, right? So if your group is working together on an activity in class, it's figuring out, okay, how much do we need to write to address this problem? Or how much do we need to do to solve this issue? The second question is, what went well with this step? Yes.
Can
Yeah.
you tell me the second
Yes.
question?
Give you another couple minutes on this. go ahead and wrap up current thoughts or idea that you're working on. The good news for this activity, right, is the work that you've been putting in so far towards this is already going to help you in preparing and thinking about your next writing assignment. So I'll be getting to that in just a minute, but before I do, I wanted to do a quick recap of some of the things that we went over last week. So last Friday, we talked a little bit about systems, right? Structures and organizations. For instance, we brought in the example of Lebanon, which is politically structured, where its representatives come from some of the different spiritual and religious groups that represent a lot of the tensions or differing views among its people, right? That a system is structured to reflect the cultural values and beliefs. We also talked about international communication and the ways that people from different perspectives and different nationalities might communicate with one another. And we talked a little bit about some of the ways that theories, including X, Y, and Z, explain group culture in the ways that group members choose to behave. Remember that international communication, right, is really steeped in culture. We looked at the example, for instance, of current tensions between the United States and Russia, right, surrounding expansion into Ukraine as an example, where things like history, context, and knowledge of that situation is an important element to understanding what the heck is going on. We also talked about these three different theories surrounding how people behave in groups. I'd like to volunteer to remind us what theory X is. Yes.
They don't, they have this position against labor, so they don't want to work everything. They want the hierarchy, they want safety and love and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. Right. So theory X is the pessimist, right? If you're a supervisor, right, you think, well, people don't want to work. They're not interested in going to work. There's other things that are more important in order for people to participate. And things like carrots and sticks would be a useful strategy if you believe in theory X, right? Because under that approach, you could say, okay, we're going to do things like offer really good health care. We're going to provide benefits and security, maybe things like helping with child care, right? In order to get somebody to a point where they're self-actualized and able to work, or, right, using things like basic survival and needs as leverage to get people to participate or work, right? Especially for people living paycheck to paycheck, right? So there's a lot of ethics and challenges surrounding that approach, but that's a more pessimistic way of thinking about how we behave. Theory-wise, we're optimistic, right? It says that people naturally want to participate. Yeah, Haley.
I was going to offer to explain theory-wise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, go for it.
Theory-wise, just like your boss's belief that you want to work, and then you have like an internal motivation to do so.
Yeah, I really like the way you characterize, Haley, the internal motivation, right? That you desire to work or participate on its own. So under that approach, right, the people that go to work are people that want to, right, and are really motivated to participate and to contribute. And again, theory Z is the middle ground between the two. Again, theory Z states, yeah, people might be interested or want to participate or be involved in a group, but they also want to feel belonging. They want to feel included and like they're a part of the group in order to do so. So these are different ways of thinking about why and how people participate in groups. So that was some of the stuff we went over for last week. This week, I want to talk about the next assignment in the class, small group assessment. We'll talk a little bit about what decision making is and some of the different approaches and strategies that we can use as part of a group to reach a decision. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the small group assessment. As I mentioned before, right, I'd like to give at least 2 weeks for you to prepare and to think about and to start drafting and working on these are writing assignments. I also wanted to give you a little bit of a buffer after completing the assignment last week. So this assignment is due in 2 weeks on February 13th. The rubric and the guidelines are available on Canvas. I'll go over those in just a minute. And then this assignment is, rather than having you think about a group you're currently or have been a part of, I'm asking you to think about the group activities that you've been participating in for this class. Again, we've gone through a lot of different ones, about 5 to 6. of these group activities. If you haven't had a chance to participate in all of them, for instance, you've been absent, that's okay, right? Draw from the ones that you have participated and engaged in for this assignment. So I'm going to go over the prompt and information on Canvas to help you with completing this assignment. So if you go to the Canvas page for this course, you'll notice that during week 6, it's posted down here, small group assessment. Again, I was originally going to have that due at the end of this week, but because of the snow days and cancellations, I wanted to push it back a week to give you a reasonable amount of time to work on this. So, as I mentioned, right, the first few weeks of the quarter, you've had the opportunity to participate in a lot of different small group activities. And these have typically been prompts or scenarios. If you're trying to remember what some of these activities were, you might look back through the previous slides that have been posted and available on Canvas to help jog your memory about what some of these prompts were. And then what I want you to do is, again, this is only going to be about 2 pages, double spaced, it's a pretty short assignment, is to address these different prompts. Again, I want to give you some clear direction here. First of all, I want you to think about how you approach problem solving in these group prompts. For instance, the different styles and steps of problem solving that we're talking about for today, and the ways that groups meet decisions. So you might explain, say, the survival exercise, we really had a person who had on the ground survival training who helped to steer the discussion. And we reached a majority rule type of decision. Secondarily, I want you to think about the role of listening in group communication. That's something we went into during the 3rd week of class, where we were talking about some of the ways that we can create a good environment and situation for people to listen to and participate in a group. You're going to want to draw from the text about some of the challenges and issues related to group listening, and just give an honest assessment. What was it like for you to listen and to participate with your fellow group members? And then lastly, last week we've talked about issues of culture and diversity. You might think about your own cultural identity and backgrounds and the ways that it shaped your participation in the group, and the ways that it shaped your interaction in the group too. For instance, you might say, for me, the role of gender was a challenge or issue that impacted the group. Because I was the only person with my gender in the group, that impacted the way that I felt like I was understood and related to, or something like that, right? So I'm asking you again to think about and apply some of the things we've been talking about in the class, particularly in regards to things we'll be going over for this week, as well as week 3 and week 4. Like before, I'll look over drafts or outlines and send them to me in advance. Just try to get them to me as soon as possible so that I have a good amount of time to turn that back around to you. Second page has the rubric. The rubric goes over 3 parts. First of all, to explain problem solving in groups, how your group was able to reach decisions. Again, I'm looking for examples, clear definition, and clear application of how you use issues of listening, culture and diversity, and application of these ideas. Again, structure and style are the same, including the use of citations, page length, so on, right? And it adds up to 150 points. So again, I will be turning around your feedback on your first writing assignment by the end of this week, which will be directly helpful for you as you prepare and think about this next assignment too. So if I mention, for instance, hey, continue to work on using citations, that's something you'll be able to directly apply and use feedback from to help you with completing this assignment. As you're working through this and thinking about this assignment, right, I'm sure questions will be coming up. You're welcome again to post them in class or to email me, and I'm happy to help you too. And of course, I'm available for office hours if you want to brainstorm, problem solve, or work through. So I just wanted to let you know that that is on the horizon and to give you the opportunity to start to prepare and to think about this one. All right. Any immediate questions that I could get out of the way that came up as I was talking through this? Great. So I want to build on the things that we've been talking about today so far in regards to problem solving, the steps to engage in a group in problem solving, right? We've talked a little bit about how, as part of a group, you have these goals and ideas that you're trying to figure out. And a core part, right, of how groups solve problems is through thinking about benefits versus costs. There's a lot of situations in which we do this. How many folks have heard of or are familiar with the idea of something like cost-benefit analysis? Okay. Seeing a couple people nodding, but I also know this might be a new idea for some. So essentially, right, we have to make decisions all the time in our lives. And when we do, we essentially have a formula that we oftentimes work in our heads, right? We think about the benefits of doing something, we subtract out the cost of doing something, and then we say, is this a net beneficial thing to do? Is this worth doing? For instance, say you have family that lives 2 hours away, and you think to yourself, should I drive out to see my family over the weekend? The benefits would be socializing, catching up on family, maybe hearing from or seeing family members that you haven't seen for quite a while, right? There's a lot of social benefits there. There's also costs. For instance, literal physical cost of gas, the cost of time. Maybe it means you have less time to do homework, which is a potential distraction, and so on, right? So you're thinking about that and then maybe making a decision and you say, you know what? While it would be great to see family, I don't feel like this is a good time to do it. I don't think this is worth doing right now. And those are the kind of judgments we make all the time in our lives, right? And when we're in a group, we oftentimes are making those decisions too. To go back to the example of like hosting a philosophy symposium or group, if you're part of the philosophy club, you might be thinking about how, if you're deciding between two different rooms to host a meeting, or you're deciding whether or not to host face-to-face or to host virtually, the benefits between those approaches. Hosting face-to-face means that it's a lot more engaged, it's in 3D space, but maybe you would get more people if you engaged virtually. Not everybody makes decisions. They're based on net benefits, right? Or the best overall option. For instance, we oftentimes fall into patterns of behavior, including in relationships with people that maybe are not good for us, but we choose to remain in those relationships out of things like habit or comfort, right? But most of the time, when we make decisions, for instance, choosing to go to college, right? We've decided that that overall is a worth it option for us. So this is a really big part of how groups make decisions, right? Is thinking about the best option. If you're deciding who to hire for a job, for instance, you're maybe interviewing people for a job, you're thinking about who the best candidate is overall, considering both their strengths and their weaknesses. So decision making, again, is reaching that type of solution, a position, a judgment, a perspective, or an action on a topic. Could be, at the end of the day, okay, our group thinks that theory X is this, and here's how our group could apply theory X in our in-class activity. It could be, here's how we've made a decision on who to hire for the job. We're recommending this candidate, here's why. Or maybe you say, you know what, we have to cancel and not do philosophy club. We can't do this activity. So that is the solution that your group reaches. And one thing that's important to think about is thinking about the role that power, authority, and so on plays in reaching that decision. For instance, how many folks involved in like an extracurricular like athletics have had competition or game that's been like canceled or changed or moved around this year? Seems nodding, right? There's a good chance that the reason that that activity was canceled or changed or modified was because of your coach, right? Your coach probably had a level of authority or unilateral judgment that they could make, and it was their decision, not yours, right? In a lot of those circumstances, things like power and authority matter a lot. Or maybe you decide somebody in your group is going to be the person that writes and ultimately puts together the group activity. In those situations, the authority and power that that group member has obviously plays a really big role in what your group ultimately produces. So it's important to think about how these different models of group participation shape our interactions too. So there are 5 major ways that that members of a group can reach a solution, right? And each of those has some pretty major advantages and disadvantages that I think are worth thinking. The first idea, right, is an idea of a plot, right, where even though there are some potential options or ways to resolve an issue, the group doesn't reach a solution. You can think about a plot as kicking the can down the road. For instance, if, again, Philosophy Club is deciding on where to host the symposium, they can't decide whether to do it face-to-face or remote. They say, you know what, we still have time, we don't know yet. We'll play it by ear, we'll watch COVID cases, and we'll do a decision next week. So that can be useful, especially if you're waiting to gather more information. But as you can probably imagine, right, perpetually waiting and pushing back a solution might mean that you never reach a solution, or you reach a solution that's too late in time for it to be used. Maybe you take forever to decide who to hire for a job, and by the time you give them an offer, they've already moved on and accepted an offer somewhere else. The idea of delegating to an expert, right, can be a useful strategy if your group feels like it's in too deep. For instance, in survival activity, maybe you decide, you know what, we as group members are not people that know a whole lot about survival skills, so we're going to defer to or delegate to this person who really knows a lot about how to survive the wilderness. So you might decide that as a group, you're not qualified to solve the issue, and you suggest somebody with expertise or a group with expertise does. Averaging, right? So averaging is basically a compromise, right? It's meeting in the middle, or it's reaching a solution that somewhat meets the needs of everybody in the group. Some of these models, right, including the role of averaging and compromise, are things that if you take class like conflict management are gone into in a little bit more depth, right? But averaging, again, would maybe be if people really want to meet face-to-face, people really want to meet virtual, maybe you made the philosophy symposium a hybrid event where you broadcast it for people to attend remotely, but also host face-to-face. Voting, right? So voting can take a couple different forms if you're the group. One of them can just be a simple majority. So all in favor, right? And if you get 50% plus one, then that group will win, or a plurality, right? Where if there are several options, the option with the most votes or support gets it. Plurality is different than a majority, right? Because a plurality does not necessarily need to be the majority if there are more than two options. To give you an example, right? Thinking back to the 90s and the election and re-election of former President Bill Clinton, right? In that presidential cycle, there were three major candidates. There was Clinton, the Republican candidate, and then an independent candidate, Ross Perot. In those situations, Clinton did not necessarily receive a majority of votes, but because he received the most votes compared to other candidates, right, he got the plurality. So voting can also be 2/3. There's a method of group organization called Robert's Rules of Order, which is a very formal and structured way that groups can reach decisions. Oftentimes under that system, and it might be one that you see for your observation activity later in the class. Under that system, you might require a 2/3 voter support in order to make a major decision. A majority isn't enough, you need more. And then consensus, right? So consensus means that there is something that everybody says is the solution or resolution to the problem. That is, everybody in the group agrees that this should be a hybrid event, right? One important and kind of tricky thing to understand is that a consensus does not necessarily mean that everybody agrees or that everybody is on the same page, right? So the concept of groupthink is an important way to think about this issue. How many folks are familiar with or heard the idea of groupthink before? Might be kind of new, right? The idea of groupthink is that when you're participating in a group, you oftentimes will self-censor your ideas in order to appeal to the group. That is, maybe everybody in the group says we should make it a hybrid event, you say, I don't really like it as a hybrid event. I think it should be face-to-face. You might say, based on what you hear from the group, oh, sure, let's make it hybrid. Not because it's what you really believe, but because you worry that expressing your real beliefs will add to the complication or chaos of you feel more comfortable holding back on your opinion for the sake of the group. We self-censor all the time for a need for social support and validation, right? We're all watching a movie and everybody is like, isn't Spider-Man great? And you didn't really like it. You might think, if I say I didn't like it, it's just going to be a whole thing. It's going to be unnecessary and people are going to argue with me. So you might say, I like it too. So consensus does not mean everybody agrees opinion-wise, but it does mean that everybody votes for or supports a solution to an issue. Consensus, right, in particular, can present some challenges. So one of them being that not everybody knows what consensus means. Consensus does not mean a majority vote, right? It just means that everybody agrees to some extent. You want to have everybody participate in the discussion as well, right? Consensus can't really be reached if not everybody feels included or involved. Listening open and honestly, of course, is important, right? You're really hearing the perspectives of everybody to reach a mutually beneficial solution. Being patient, looking for good ways to solve the problem, of course, are really important too. You might think about the interests or needs that everybody in the group has, trying to find a way to roll them all together. And then gridlock refers to the idea that people have two diametrically opposed views. One person says this has to be face-to-face, one person says this has to be a virtual event. A hybrid event might be a way to resolve or address that gridlock. Another consideration in terms of reaching solutions is an idea known as analysis paralysis, which is kind of a fun rhyme. So if you're like me, right, and you ever, like after a long day, decide to hop on your computer, or hop on your TV, or hop on your phone and watch something on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or whatever, right? There's so many options, but nothing to watch, right? There are so many things that are available to us to technically watch, but we feel like we can't make a decision on what to watch, so we spend an hour just scrolling and browsing through and never ending up watching something. And then we're like, oh, it's like 11 at night, I should go to bed. So that's an issue, right? That sometimes the sheer number and amount of options available to us means that we don't have the ability to reach a solution. Because again, there's a lot of thought that goes into brainstorming, but not a lot of thought that actually applies and uses the ideas towards hitting a solution. This is an important idea for us to think about too. We'll talk next class about this a little bit more, but I did want to preview the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum, which ranges in terms of different ways that decisions are made. So again, we'll hit more on this idea for next class. Just know that the way that we make decisions in groups can range between a very autocratic, right, a method in which the leader or supervisor in the group makes the decision, to a democratic solution in which people make like a majority decision, to a participative solution in which everybody works together and collaborates more actively. So what I want to do in the remaining time that we have in class is to assign you one of the different ways that a group can reach a decision. And I want you to think about the benefits, the challenges, and whether or not you would choose this method of reaching a solution. So what I'm going to do is number you off, and based on how I number you, right, I'll assign you a different role. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1. So if you were a 1, right, you are assigned to the clock role. If you're a 2, you're a delegation to an expert. If you're a 3, You're averaging. If you're a 4, you're voting. If you're a 5, you're consensus. And Andre will have you be a 2 for delegating.
Okay.
So everybody know the one that they've been assigned? Yes. Yes. So using the one of the 5 that you've been assigned, I want you to take some time to think about the benefits of this method, the challenges of this method, and whether or not you would choose this method. If you're pop, you're thinking, well, that's a method of not reaching the solution, right? But you might think about how that could be useful in deferring a decision to later. I'll give you some time to think about and to work on this. go ahead and finish up her thought or idea that you're writing. Again, this is more of brainstorming for you to help you to start to think about and use this information for your next writing assignment. You think about it as, hey, already started to do the initial work to prepare for this assignment in class regarding group membership and group participation. So to wrap up for today, we talked about this group membership reflection assignment. This next assignment that is asking you to participate in groups that'll be due on February 13th. We talked a little bit about decision making, including those 7 core steps of decision making. And we talked a little bit about some of the different ways that people make decisions, some of the benefits and drawbacks that those approaches can have, things such as consensus versus a majority vote, and so on. For next class, we'll be building on these ideas a little bit more to discuss the role of creativity, right? And what it means for group members to reach thoughtful or interesting solutions that can address an issue. So go ahead and either email or pass forward your prompt for today. If you haven't done so already. Have a great Monday, and I hope that you enjoy your week. I'll see you soon.